Leigh Brown. This is Crazy Shit in Real Estate. And today we're going to do a deep dive into Manhattan real estate. Maybe you are watching Only Murders in the Building, or you watch Mad Men or Sex and the City, and you want to know a little more about that real estate market because it's so wildly unique. Today we've got Lisa Lippman. She is a wildly experienced realtor in the city, and she's got some insights and stories for you. So buckle down and enjoy this conversation because I sure did. And I'll see you on the other side. You're listening to Crazy Shit in Real Estate. You'll be amazed at all these wild but true situations that others have found themselves in. Because on this show, you'll hear uncensored, unbelievable stories from the world of real estate. I'm Leigh Brown. Let's dive right in. Before you get the rest of the story, I'd love to share a quick message from today's sponsor. If you've never heard of Follow Up Boss, you're going to love it. And it's going to get you organized in a way that will actually impact your business for profitability and for better excellence with those you're serving. For more information, go to followupboss.com/crazy. Hey, real estate agents, do you struggle to make videos for your YouTube channel that actually make your phone ring? Do you have a YouTube channel, but the videos don't get any views and you're really not getting phone calls from the people who are dying to hire you? Well, guess what? My good friend, Karen Carr, teaches real estate agents how to make YouTube videos that actually turn into an evergreen sales funnel. You'll spend a couple of hours making a very simple video without a lot of bells and whistles and, frankly, not much production value. And people are going to call you when they're ready to buy or sell a house in your market, not just right now, but for weeks and months and years to come. Yay, evergreen content. Now, she's doing a free 5-day challenge starting on Halloween, October 31st. So I highly recommend this. I mean, it's a free challenge. You can do it if you just will. You will learn how to set up your channel to grab viewers by the eyeballs, how to research what exactly they'd like to watch, and what your YouTube channel needs to have highly converting videos. Best part of all this, it's a free challenge and you don't have to spend a lot of money on ads. So enroll today at youtubeforagents.com/Leigh. I can't wait to see what you come up with. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Fantastic. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
After having a rush of investors and companies, I'm all excited to hear from somebody who real deal works in luxury residences, but it's not a fake like on HGTV. So, Lisa, why don't you tell the audience where you're located and how long you've been in the real estate business? Give them a little bit of background on you.
Sure. So I live in Manhattan. I happen to live on 86 between Broadway and Amsterdam, with the heart of the Upper West Side. And I live actually in a building that some of your listeners may be interested in. It's called the Belnord, which is featured in, oh my gosh, I can't think of the name, Only Murders.
Oh, I haven't watched that show, but I hear it's fantastic. That's Steve Martin's new show, right?
Exactly. So we now have hordes of people who come up from all over the world who stop in front of the building and want to take pictures and videos, and they want to go in the courtyard, and the doormen are not supposed to let them in. So whenever there's somebody in the courtyard or wants to come into the courtyard, I always let them in. I bring them in as a guest so that they can take a video of themselves in the courtyard, because we've got a beautiful fountain, and it's a very beautiful building that was built in 1904. So that's where I live. And I live with my husband and my youngest son, who's going to turn 17. And my middle son, who's 25, just moved back from Chicago after a 2-year doing Teach for America. And now he's working in New York, and he moved back home. So, and then I've got a 28-year-old son who works with me. So I have 3 great boys, and I'm surrounded by all of them. I have a male dog too. So actually I have 5. I have a lot of men around me, 5 men, a husband, 3 boys, and a boy dog. And I've been in residential real estate for almost 25 years. I started in 1997, and I worked for the Corcoran Group for about 5 or 6 years. And then in 2005, I switched to Brown Harris Stevens, which is the company I work for now. And I sell luxury real estate all over Manhattan. I do very, very little in Brooklyn. Generally, I'm going to refer somebody out to Brooklyn or New Jersey or anything else. So I just do Manhattan. And I sell all kinds of properties, townhouses, co-ops, condos, walk-ups, $30 million apartments, $1 million apartments, new apartments, old apartments, mid-condition apartments, Rex, you name it, I sell it.
I love that the language of Manhattan real estate is just so unique in the real estate space, because for you, $1 million is let's see if we can find you something. And down here, $1 million could be anything.
Yeah.
But I'm mostly curious to hear from you in a quarter century of real estate. So you're coming up on your silver anniversary. How amazing is that? You've watched Manhattan go through so many changes as far as which neighborhoods are hot and which ones are stable and which ones are up and coming. And I speak to this because I used to live in Murray Hill. So I lived at 37th and Lex, but that was probably about the time you were getting into real estate. It's been a long time, but Murray Hill was not Disney-fied, as we like to say at the time. It was a little bit more of a rough around the edges and spaces at that time. But now, of course, everything is very well kept there. And so just from my personal experience, I watched that change. As a realtor, what would you say has been surprising in looking at the different areas of town? And do you feel like you're able to spot an area as it starts to hit its stride?
Yeah. So I guess what's most amazing is that there's almost no neighborhood in New York now that's not gentrified. So, as a realtor, that's great, right? And for a city, that's great.
Sure.
Of course, it's not great for people who've lived here for a long time who sometimes get priced out of their homes.
Exactly.
And that is always the negative of over gentrification, is that the city becomes a place that only very wealthy people can afford. And that definitely has happened in the 25 years I've been in the business. I've been in the business for kind of an interesting time. So in 96, the market started taking off, and it's just basically continued to go up. We've had little peaks and valleys, but we haven't had like a long run where things have gone down in value. And I'll just give you a quick little snippet, which is an example. So in 1996, my ex-husband and I bought our first apartment at the Ansonia, which at the time was this rundown former pre-war hotel apartment building on 74th and Broadway. And I remember when we were buying there in 96, my friends from the East Side told me, "You're crazy. That place is a nutty place. And the ceilings are falling in and it's a crazy place." And I wasn't a broker at the time. I was a lawyer. And I said, look at the windows, look at the ceiling height, look at the moldings. This is going to be a beautiful place someday. So we bought our apartment, which seemed like really a ton of money, for $790,000 in 1996, 2,500 square feet. And it's now going on the market. It's the third owner since us for $4 million. And it hasn't been renovated since 1996. Which is amazing. It's the renovation we bought new. So here you have something that's depreciated in terms of the way it looks, and it's going on the market for 4 times as much. So that kind of shows you sort of the last 25 years I've been in the business. And by the way, we're not at a peak right now. We're in a little bit of a slump. So it just shows you how crazy things are. So I would tell you that the crazy thing going back is that there is not a bad neighborhood anymore. Neighborhoods that I thought would never get gentrified have become gentrified, like Hell's Kitchen and the Hudson Yards area. When I first went into the business and I lived on 74th Street, people would say to me on the west side that they would definitely not go north of 86th Street. There was no way they would. And then within 10 years, people would say, "Oh, well, I'll go to 90th Street." And with another 5 years, they'd say, "I'd go up to 96th Street." And now people go way past 96th Street. Obviously, back then when I started doing business, downtown was cool, but it wasn't yet expensive. Mm-hmm. So the Village and Soho and Tribeca had not taken off yet. And you could still get really, really good deals there. And now you can't touch anything downtown. It's so much more expensive than uptown. The only neighborhood that probably hasn't changed in value that much is the Upper East Side, west of Park Avenue. That has always been gentrified. It has always been lovely, and it continues to be so.
So in that area that's been almost its own little cocoon, do those areas tend to reach out to brokers, or are those word of mouth transfers from people who are already highly connected in the city?
So do you mean like the neighborhoods that are up and coming? Like how do people
like in the Upper East Side, where you have an enclave that likes where they live. It's always been somewhat insulated, and the people know who lives where. Are real estate brokers highly utilized there, or do people just hear about properties and do it amongst themselves?
So in the first 5 or 10 years I was in the business, we probably still saw a lot of sort of pocket listings, quiet listings that got transferred between people in some of the fanciest buildings on the East Side. There was this feeling that not everybody could get into those buildings because they were co-ops, that not everybody should look at those listings, that it should only be shown to certain people. The web changed everything. So with the advent of, you remember the World Wide Web, what we used to call it?
So funny to think about that. We sound so old when we say that.
Right. Everything changed, and there's no longer, or almost no longer, pocketed listings.
Right.
Pocket listings, because basically everyone knows that the way you get the most money for your property is by having as many people see it. We have wealthy people who come from all over. Mm-hmm. And, so people generally don't limit their audience. And while there are some brokers who may just work in the Upper East Side, that's becoming less and less common. And most of the brokers who are under 50 work all over the city. I'm sort of on the cusp. I'm going to be 58, so I can fall into sort of the old timer group or a little bit of the younger group. But, my contemporaries tend to work all over the city. I think there's some of the brokers who are a bit older who are still very sort of set on just being in the neighborhood. But that's definitely changing with the times.
Well, some of that happens with the inventory. The supply issue has been an issue. So you have to figure out where somebody can go, and that might not be where you'd like to be. So you go a couple streets over. And that leads me to ask a question. So you said it's a little bit of a blip right now. Of course, New York City is not really going to fall off the map just because of the size of the economy and the scope of the economy. So what has COVID and the COVID era done to the real estate market? And what's it doing right now? Have you seen a recovery in the commercial space? And are people back living in the city? Did they ever really leave? Or was that just mainstream media talk?
So what I'll tell you is that right before COVID hit in January of 2020, we actually were at somewhat of a low period in the real estate market. It was the first time since 1987 that the real estate market had not followed the stock market.
Oh.
So between 2016 and 2019, our market actually slowly softened, despite the fact that the stock market was so high. Nobody really understood why. Probably what happened is that sellers got a little greedy and just kept raising their prices. And the market didn't sustain it. Buyers wouldn't have any of it. And then also our market became much more transparent. It used to be that people couldn't see how long things were on the market. People didn't know what things had sold for. And then we had something called Street Easy that came into the market in the early 2000s, but by mid 2015 or something, absolutely everybody knew how to use it. And people could see how long things were on the market. They could see what the last thing had traded for if there had been price reductions. So that combined with rising inventory, rising prices, it softened the market. So right before COVID, we had about a 10% drop between the height of 16 and January of 2020. And then when COVID hit, it dropped about another 10%. So if you were lucky enough, smart enough, daring enough to buy something in the summer or fall of 2020, you got a deal of about 20% below the height of 16. What happened, and I always thought it would because I worked through 9/11 and I saw the bounce back in the spring after 9/11, was in the spring of 2021, starting in about February of 2021, when we had vaccinations and things like that, people started buying like crazy. And it was like the spigot on a closed faucet had been opened. So think about it. People had made a lot of money in the market over the last few years. They hadn't spent their money on anything. Mm-hmm. And if they decided to stay in New York, they wanted a bigger apartment. They wanted a Peloton room. They needed an office. They needed all these rooms that they used to go out to the gym, go to their office midtown or downtown. So people with money, and New York has plenty of them, started buying very large homes. And we had a really, really busy market. We definitely gained back 10% and maybe even did a little bit better. What happened in May of this past year, in 2022, is that the stock market did, start to soften. Mm-hmm. The interest rates went up from people being able to borrow at just below 3% to people being able to borrow at like 4.5%, which, as you and I both know, historically is still low, but didn't feel low at that moment. And there was a lot of talk about a recession. So I'm sure the worst thing for a real estate market is uncertainty. A lot of people started feeling that, why don't I wait? Things are going to soften. I'll wait and see what happens with the recession. Maybe I'll be able to buy something for less money. So this summer was definitely quiet, especially at the high end. A lot of the high end buyers also were out of town. They weren't able to travel for 2 years. So, I'm sure you've got a lot of friends. People went to Europe. They went all over the place. So it was quiet in the city. I still did a decent amount of deals below $4 million. Reason being that those people have the option of either buying or renting. And the rents in New York City are still crazy high. So if you did a purchase cost analysis, in many cases, it still made more sense to buy something. I am starting to feel that it's getting busier again just in the last week as people are coming back to New York. So I think the fall will feel okay. You know, what we have in New York City, and I think the city may be more sensitive than other places, is that there's no room for overpricing. Even when we have tight inventory, people are very, very, very price conscious. We have so much information out there now that if you overprice, you don't sell. If you price well, you will sell it quickly. And if you underprice, you'll have a bidding war. We have a very, very efficient market. To address your other question about people leaving, yes, we did have people leave. I just heard a statistic that 565 people left Manhattan during COVID to make Palm Beach their primary home.
Did you say 565?
565 families or groups. That's quite a bit, going from a very large city to a very small place.
Right.
So we felt that. I will say, though, that I think what happened is there were a lot of people who had been sitting on the sidelines who weren't able to move into New York because it had been so expensive.
Right.
Saw the prices come down a bit, and suddenly it made more sense. And I'm going to give you an exact example. And I saw this coming when COVID started. So we have people who moved out when their kids were little to the suburbs of New York, whether it's New Jersey, Long Island, Connecticut, Westchester. Now their kids are grown and they've wanted to come back to the city. But their homes in the last few years, they had a hard time selling them before COVID. They were getting less for them than they thought. And the apartments in New York were more than they thought. Well, suddenly during COVID, that changed. Their homes became much more valuable because there was a run to the suburbs. They had bidding wars on their homes, and the apartments in Manhattan became more reasonably priced. So the math now worked. I knew that would happen, and it did happen. I can't tell you how many empty nesters around my age. I chose to stay in New York and raise my kids here, but many people didn't. Sure. Come back to New York. The house that they thought they could only get $2.5 million for, now they suddenly got $3 million for. And the apartment that they thought was going to cost $3.5 million now costs $3 million. So the math made sense. So as many times as we lost people, we gained people.
So let's just say you're a practicing realtor and you want to hang out with the people doing more business than you, because we all know you don't have to recreate the wheel. Guess what? There is a community of highly ambitious, organized, energetic real estate professionals. There are solo agents, teams, brokerages all over the place. They're coming to Follow Up Boss Conference, also known as FubCon. So maybe you want to take your game to the next level. If you come to Follow Up Boss Conference, you're going to master the 5 biggest levers for building your real estate business over the long haul: systems, marketing, lead conversion, lead retention, and accountability. All 5 are available to you at fubcon.com. This is November 8th through 10th in sunny Las Vegas. Take a flight out there, write it off on your taxes, get more ideas and you can implement. And if you want to check out Follow Up Boss in the meantime, go to followupboss.com/crazy for a 30-day free trial where you'll be so sucked in, you'll definitely want to come to the conference and hang out with the people who can help you elevate your business. FUBcon.com. Sign up today. I love that perspective, because when you look at any market, it's so easy to make the assumption that everything is operating at the same way, especially if you're reading the national news media, because they act like there's a national real estate market. But the explanation you just gave is proof that a realtor can help you understand the different micro markets. And that is the perfect explainer of no matter what's happening elsewhere, you might be in the right space to do what you want to do and take advantage of it. I love that. And I hated to take you down the total nerd hole of all the market data, but I have an opportunity to talk to somebody right in the heart of the world's most vibrant city. So I'm going to totally pick your brain on that, Lisa. But, you know, the story of the show is the crazy things that we see in real estate that really nobody would ever believe that we go through, that we see, that we anticipate. And I will say that my dear friend, Patrick Lilly, I'm sure you know Patrick, he's a very well Manhattan broker. When he was on my show, he was one of my very first episodes 6 years ago. And I got so excited because he got to sell the apartment that the B-52s had. And it was a whole closet full of wigs. And it's one of my most memorable moments because I was so jealous. But I'm very anxious to know what you've seen in your years of real estate that was just surprising, shocking, awe-inspiring. What's that moment that you tell people about? And frankly, you probably used that to get your 28-year-old to join you in the business.
So I'm not going to talk about famous people because part of my thing is that I don't talk. I don't kiss and tell. So I try not to do that. But I will tell you a great story about many years ago. I was selling an apartment on Central Park West. And it was not an estate. It was owned by a woman who sadly had gone through some financial trouble and had to sell her apartment. And she had not maintained the apartment in many years. But not only had she not maintained it, it was in such bad condition that the foyer of the apartment actually had a hole in the floor. So if you weren't careful, your foot would go into the floor. So anyway, when we were doing the final walkthrough, which we do, before closing, we were going through the apartment to make sure it was empty. And few closets, we found, one shoe, a scarf, one sock, little odds and ends, it had been sort of cleaned up. And we go into the main coat closet and I opened the closet door and there was the largest shotgun I had ever seen. Now, that is very shocking in New York because, as you know, guns are not legal in New York. You don't see guns in New York except on policemen.
And not a shotgun by itself in a closet.
No, it was just in the coat closet, a big shotgun. So I didn't really know what to do. So I decided to call 911 because I thought, I think I have to have the police come and take the shotgun away, which is what I did. So that was one of the more interesting walkthroughs that I've ever done. And that was just, in a very calm Central Park West apartment. It was a little strange. And the woman who was selling the apartment, you would have never thought about why she had a shotgun in there.
So did you ever find out why she left it in there? Was it an oversight? She didn't want to take it, or was it just that odd?
Yeah, we never did find out.
I wouldn't leave one behind, but I also live on 10 acres and I have raccoons and critters around. It's a little different environment than it is in New York.
Yes. So some of my other crazy small world, I have a lot of small world stories. Like people always think that New York City's so big. And what's so crazy is that I feel like half the time I go into apartments, if there are personal photographs, I know the people or recognize them. And it does not matter what neighborhood I'm in. So that happens all the time, which is really strange. And then the other strange thing that happens as a New Yorker, just being a real estate broker, which means that I'm always kind of walking around and in different neighborhoods, is that there are certain people I bump into all the time. And I don't always bump into them in the same neighborhood. I might bump into them in Broadway and 82nd Street, then 5th Avenue and 60th Street, and then someplace in Tribeca or Soho. And then there are other people who you never see ever, even though they're your neighbor. So I don't know, I guess for your audience, what's funny about New York is it's a really big city with so many people, but sometimes it feels like a really little village.
So after you say that, it makes me realize when I was younger and obviously more single and I watched Sex and the City like everybody did back in the 90s, it seemed unusual that they would often run into people in the city. But what you're saying is it's actually not that odd that your people are going to be spotted here and there. So probably you should better behave. I think you would teach your boys that, right? Be careful what you do. Somebody's going to see you.
Be careful what you do. Be careful what you say. I have to say that if I'm ever, speaking about anybody, I'm not saying that something bad, but just telling a story about somebody, you always have to talk softly and you just never know who's next to you and who's at the next table of you. It is a much smaller place than you would imagine.
I think that's just good manners, Lisa. It's good manners not to.
I agree.
Talk about your business and other people, except in really good generalities where it can't be easily identified.
Exactly.
All right. So now, before I let you off the show, I love hearing about multi-generational real estate because I'm a kid of a realtor. I know which one of my kids will go in real estate, even though she doesn't see it yet. I can totally see it. What did it take for your son to say yes to coming into the business with you? Did he have an entrepreneurial bent his whole life, or has he just seen what you've done and would like to emulate his mom?
I would say that he's always been interested in the business. When my older boys, so my boys are 28, 25, and almost 17. So when my 28-year-old and 25-year-old, who grew up much more together, obviously, we would be in the car. And remember those good old days of long drives without videos?
Yes.
When you would just sing to your children or try to keep them happy. They used to play a game with me where they would describe an apartment. They'd say, Mom, 10-foot ceilings, views of the park, 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, brand new kitchen. And then they would say, how much? So they would describe sort of what they would imagine as a dream apartment. And then they wanted me to price it for them. So I think
that's hilarious. That's hilarious.
Max, my 28-year-old, was always super interested. He's also just really interested in sort of people, restaurants, places, traveling, connecting people. So I always thought he had the bend, and he started talking about it. And I was thrilled to think that he would come into business with me. He's been working with me for 2 years. I had him work for another broker for almost 2 years before. So I didn't want him to come straight to mama. And we've had just the best time. I mean, I've got 3 other people with who I work with, and everybody's worked with me for a long time, which is really nice. And, it's great to see a young person who is learning, but also can actually teach me a lot, right? He has a different perspective on things than I do. As older people, I think we sometimes get set in our ways. And it's always good to have a fresh perspective, especially when it comes to technology.
I know, because that's second nature to them. And for us, it's like, okay, let me carve out a little time here so I can figure it out. And you're right. It's always good to take in that thought process, especially as you communicate with clients, because they expect us to think multi-generationally, because that's who the buyer audience is and who the seller audience is.
Yeah,
so good,
absolutely.
Good for you.
Yeah. The other thing I would say in New York is we have buyers literally from, age 25 to 90. And 25 to 90, they can all spend any place from $500,000 up to whatever. So we have very young, wealthy people, we have older, wealthy people, and everything in between. So you sort of have to know how to talk to everybody.
And let's just say that's what we need to bring back, not just in Manhattan, but all around the world. If people would learn how to communicate, we could fix a lot of what's wrong. So Lisa, if somebody enjoyed this conversation and wants to talk to you about Manhattan real estate, how is it best for them to hunt you down?
I would say emailing me is always great. And my email is L like Lisa, L like Lippman, IPPMAN @BHSUSA.com. So L Lippman @BHSUSA.com.
And never fear, if you couldn't write that down because you're in the middle of your walk, all of Lisa's contact information is in the show notes for this episode. So please reach out to her with any questions about the Manhattan real estate market and just to get some insights. And maybe she'll even tell you where to eat dinner when you come visit. Lisa, thank you so much for coming on the show. And thank you for bringing us a lot of different angles in this episode.
Well, thanks so much for having me. It was great talking to you.
All right, friends, say something nice about Lisa, something nice about New York, or something that surprised you in the comments. And in the meantime, I'll see you next time.
Have a great weekend.
Okay, now don't forget to go try Follow Up Boss so that your business can continue to expand in professionalism, and then you can meet some more crazy people yourself. I really appreciate Follow Up Boss sponsoring this episode, but mainly I appreciate them for giving y'all double the free trial time with no credit card required. So make sure you go to followupboss.com/crazy and then let me know what you think. I'll see you guys next time. As always, I'm so super thrilled that you joined in for more crazy shit. And if you're a realtor, investor, inspector, lender, or just a regular human being who happens to have an unbelievable story that you need to tell the world about, or frankly, you just need to one-up the story you just heard, then make sure to DM me on Instagram @LeightThomasBrown or tweet me @LeightBrown, or frankly, any social network where you hang out. I'm there. And if you had some fun, then you totally want to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes.